Fans were shocked when Frank Fritz was fired from American Pickers in March 2020, but that was just a light rain. The real storm was coming. Because when the owner heard that he had died in September 2024, it sent shockwaves through their world. Even though his death was very sad, it wasn't the most shocking thing that happened. The rumors about Frank's last words gave everyone who heard them chills. Just when everyone thought the shock couldn't get any worse, his estate revealed something so shocking that no one could say anything. But before we talk about the shocking findings, let's remember one of the world's most dedicated fans. You see, Frank Fritz was born in Davenport, Iowa on October 11, 1963. He was naturally curious, which made him stand out. Frank was interested in history when most kids his age were after flyballs and the newest comic books. Anything with a story, no matter how small or unimportant it seemed, interested him. This included old coins, rusty beer cans, used stamps, and even razor blades that were no longer useful. He thought that everything had a history, a reason for being here, and a place in someone's life before it came here, and he wanted to know everything about it. His love for it grew as he did. He moved up from small trinkets to bigger gems like motorcycles, dirt bikes, and rare items that were worn down but held a lot of history. He liked to fight at flea markets and play at estate sales. Frank was the one who would knock on the door of any old barn off a forgotten highway if it was full of old things. He was ready to dig through the dust. Most people thought it was just a weird hobby. It was a calling for Frank. But this is where things went in a strange direction. He didn't jump right into collecting old things. Life pulled him in a different direction instead. And he did that job in Iowa for almost 25 years. You had to pay attention to details, be precise, and be dedicated to keeping people safe for this job to be taken seriously. But his love for gathering never went away, no matter how much time he spent checking fire rules and inspecting buildings. In fact, his job made things worse. He went into old firehouses, warehouses that had been abandoned, and other buildings that no one had been in for years every day. These were full of secret gems just waiting for someone like him to find them and bring them back to life. At that point, he started to gather things related to the fire department, like masks with sooty leather, old fire alarms that used to sound through the chaos, and fire extinguishers that had been used a lot. Frank went after all of them. Not long after, he realized he was onto something bigger than just a collection for himself. Not only were these artifacts interesting, they were also valuable. He started buying and selling things, and over time, side business. Soon enough, the thought of making his hobby his job began to creep in. He had had a steady job for years at this point, but he knew where his heart was right now. It wasn't easy for him to quit a stable job, but his real love was stronger. He decided to jump. He opened Frank's Finds, a small antique store that sold firefighter tools and unique items. It was just a small step towards something new at first. But what he didn't know was that that little store was the start of a job that would soon take him on a journey to find treasure and become famous in a way he never thought possible. A lot of people knew Frank Fritz before American Pickers. He was just a guy who liked to look for secret riches and enjoy the thrill of the hunt. But Frank wasn't the only one who felt this way. Mike Wolf, who was also from Iowa, was also obsessed with the same thing. They weren't best friends at first, but they became close because they both loved picking. Mike got a big idea over time. He saw picking as more than just a hobby. He saw it as a way of life that could grow into something huge. Frank was happy running his shop, Frank's Finds, and Mike was filming his treasure-finding trips and trying to get people to watch a TV show based on them. Frank finally agreed after being persuaded for a while. It began with two guys hitting the road to find lost artifacts, but it quickly became a huge hit on reality TV. It was a big hit when American Pickers first aired on the History Channel in 2010. More than 1 million people watched the first show, making it one of the best starts for the network ever. But the show wasn't just about the old things. It was also about how well Mike and Frank got along. The way they were excited wasn't planned, and their bond was real. They had been making friends in the secondhand world for years, and people respected them for being honest and knowing a lot. Now that the cameras were going and the fun. Mike was good at business and was always on the lookout for the next big thing. Frank, on the other hand, was the main person behind everything. He was good at putting people at ease, which turned stressful talks into friendly chats. He wasn't just after the money. He was interested in the stories behind the things they found. That he was real made him a fan favorite. People saw a man who loved what he did, whether he was talking about an old motorcycle or laughing with a seller. American Pickers was a must-see for more than 10 years. Every week, Frank and Mike went on the road to look for secret treasures in barns, sheds, and junkyards. Danielle Colby stayed at Antique Archaeology to keep things running smoothly. The three of them worked well together. They were more than just business partners. They were also friends who shared a love. But road trips don't last forever, and Frank's trip, which seemed like it would never end, went in a way that no one saw coming. When the first signs of trouble with American Pickers showed up, they didn't make people worry right away. Frank Fritz's last show was in March 2020, but most fans thought he'd be back soon because the world was so unpredictable at the time. They didn't know that Frank was having a lot of problems behind the scenes that would change everything in the end. Even though Frank Fritz didn't talk much about his problems, they got too big to ignore over time. Fans have seen his weight go up and down for years. Some thought it was just getting older, but others thought something was wrong. Frank finally told them that he had Crohn's disease, a long-term illness that affects the gut system. It hurts, is hard to plan for, and is tiring. Frank first tried to deal with it by following a strict diet, which helped him lose 65 pounds. But Crohn's isn't something that can be fixed. Fight it. Even though he was in pain, tired, and didn't know what would happen next, he never stopped doing what she loved. But his health problems weren't the only thing that was making him feel bad. Fame changes things, and sometimes it was worse for Frank. Things got a lot harder after American Pickers became popular. He was no longer just a guy looking for old things. He was now a reality TV star. People knew who he was and expected him to be the funny, smart guy they saw on TV everywhere he went. They didn't see the stress that came with it, though. Frank said that being in the public eye made him nervous, and it got worse over time. But things really went wrong in 2020 because Frank's health got so bad, he had to have major back surgery. And sadly, it wasn't a simple surgery. He had 185 stitches, 2 rods put in his spine, and would need to heal for months. Besides that, he was also fighting his own demons, such as addiction. At first, his departure seemed like a short break that would help him heal. But as the 21st season of American Pickers went on without him, fans began to wonder what was going on. Then, in July 2021, Mike Wolfe said Frank was leaving for good. In a message, Mike told Frank he would miss him and wished him the best. Frank, however, didn't seem to believe it. He said Mike's words were empty in an interview and dropped a news that shocked fans. Mike had never called to see how he was doing during his whole rehab. They've worked together for decades without ever calling each other. It was clear to Frank that they had never been as close as people thought. Off-screen, things were different from how they were on film. He thought Mike had been waiting for a long time for a chance to get rid of him from the show, and now that Frank wasn't working, that chance had finally come. Fans were shocked. They had been traveling, laughing, and making a popular show together for years. How could they just break up like that? As expected, there were a lot of arguments on the internet. Some people said Mike was to blame for not being there for Frank, while others said Frank's personal problems were the real reason he left. As Frank spoke, Mike replied that everyone on the show cared about him, and that getting him back on track had not been easy. As always, the truth was more complex than any one story. Later, a friend of both men said that they were both worn out from working together for years, putting in long hours, having tight shooting plans, and the stress of keeping a hit show going. After Frank's health problems and other problems in his personal life, it was clear that their relationship was falling apart. The friend said that both men just needed space. a break from the daily grind that they had been stuck in for over 10 years. It wasn't just one moment of betrayal or a big fallout. When you think about it, it was about two men who had worked together for years, but had grown apart because of fame, stress, and personal problems. It was hard for fans to take. In the show, it seemed like Frank and Mike would always work together, but in real life, things were very different. Frank stayed very active in the world of antiques even after he stopped working on TV. He knew that the way people gathered was changing because more and more people were shopping online. He changed by opening his own online shop and connecting with fans all over the world through social media. Frank wasn't interested in staying current. The point was to keep the picking spirit living in a new age, even though Frank loved old things. His other favorite thing was riding motorbikes. He has loved bikes since he was a child. A 1964 Harley Davidson was one of his first big purchases. It probably made his parents nervous, but it made him love old bikes even more. He built up a huge collection of rare and classic bikes over the years, enough to fill a whole barn. He didn't just gather them, he also taught others what he knew. He wrote a book called How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles in 2013 that explained everything, from how to find secret gems to how to keep old bikes in good shape. He included a part on old toy bikes, showing that his love of collecting wasn't just for big things. It was for the little things, the skill and the stories behind each one. In addition to his own collection, Frank made it a point to help other people who liked antiques. He worked with other experts to put on old fairs, shows, and live events that brought together collectors and sellers who shared his interest. He also wrote American Pickers, Guide to Picking with Another Person, which gives fans a more in-depth look into the world of picking. Frank was unique, not only because he could spot a good find, but also because he could make history fun. His stories about old things, like a broken gas pump or a lost toy from the 1950s, made the past come alive. He didn't just pick to buy and sell things. It was also a way for him to keep stories alive, one prize at a time. There was a tragedy that changed everything about his fight with Mike, which most people thought would last for years. Frank's life took a terrible turn in July 22. He had a big stroke at his Iowa home in Davenport. When help got there, he wasn't responding, and things were very bad. He was taken to the hospital right away, and doctors worked hard to stabilize him. But the harm was too great. Fans had been nervously waiting for news about him for years, hoping he would make it through. He spent almost a month in the hospital before being moved to a rehab center to begin the long, hard road to recovery. A stroke doesn't just knock you out. It can also take away everything you took for granted before. Frank had been touring the country, making deals, and living his life on his own terms for years. Suddenly needing help with simple things was a painful truth for him. He was no longer able to take care of himself, so the court had to step in and choose a guardian to take care of his daily needs and a bank to keep an eye on his money. He could no longer be independent, which was something he had always valued. And there was the cost. His hospital bills were said to be $29,000 a month. It was very clear from that amount how much he had lost. One thing that didn't go as planned, though, was how the stroke changed things between him and Mike. Frank asked to see Mike in May 2023, which was a surprise to everyone. They finally sat down together after years of being apart, being angry, and not talking. A friend who was there later said it made them feel sad. Both men were crying. Mike told Frank something very important. No one could ever be like him again. It wasn't about the show, the business, or who was right or wrong for the first time in years. It was about the bond they had formed years before American Pickers was even a thought. They were just two guys who loved the thrill of the hunt, taking back roads, finding lost riches, and having the same dream. Even after everything, that link was still there. It may have been hidden under years of anger, but it was never really broken. The worst was over for Frank's health by September 2024. His body was too weak to fight anymore after years of being sick. The people who cared about him knew the end was near, and Mike didn't think twice when the call came. He ran to help Frank and joined Frank's mother and a close family friend. Things they hadn't said or thought were heavy in the room, like the weight of everything they had been through. Things had been tough between Frank and Mike for years, but that moment, it didn't matter. Their real relationship, the one that wasn't caught on camera or in the news, was all that was left. After the fact, Mike said that he was holding Frank's hand when he died. His words were soft and sweet. "I love you, I forgive you, and everything is okay." Frank was gone in an instant. Frank's last words, which were both disturbing and important, hung in the air before he died. The past is never really gone. It's always with us, hiding in the shadows. These words, spoken by a man who had spent his whole life finding lost riches, seemed almost magical. His family and friends still think about him and wonder what he was thinking when he died. His death document says that Frank died because of problems that came up after he had a stroke. Besides that, he was dealing with aortic stenosis, a condition that made even the easiest things like walking, breathing, and standing very painful. His body had been through a lot and had fought the whole time. But in the end, it was too weak to keep going. But even though his death marked the end of an age, what was found in his estate afterward was so shocking that not even the people who knew him best could believe it. Frank liked bikes, that much everyone knew. But not many people knew how big his collection had grown. When his private garage doors were finally opened after he died, even the people who knew him best were shocked by what they saw. Row after row of old motorbikes. Some have been carefully fixed up and shine under the lights, while others are covered in dust and are just waiting for their chance to shine again. A lot of work had gone into collecting these rare Indian bikes, classic Harley-Davidsons, and special choppers over the years. There were bikes that had been fully repaired and bikes that were still in pieces, showing that the love for the work had never gone away. Frank didn't just see these machines as tools. He saw them as memories of exciting times and proof of how hard he worked at picking. He had searched all over the country for them, spent years fixing them up, and kept them close to his heart like priceless artifacts from the past. For people who knew how much they meant to him, the thought of them being sold is almost like crazy. Some say that a sale is already planned for later this year, where every bike, every old sign, and every carefully kept piece of history will be sold. But now comes the part that no one saw coming. The money won't be put into a business or private estate fund. They will be given to charity instead, which is what Frank has always wanted to do. It will be his last act of kindness.